a collection of stories, songs, poems, and hymns that a nation collected together, treasured and held on to give them hope in the face of chaos and crisis. Imagine that. The story of a man called Joseph is contained in a book called Genesis, which is in itself part of a collection of books we call the Bible. And that collection, in particular the first part of it, the Jewish or Hebrew scriptures, is a collection of a nation's memories and stories and identity that were collected together at a time when they were in chaos and crisis, and they needed hope. They needed to remember who they were. There are hundreds of stories, but at the same time there is a story. The story of Joseph is part of a family story. A family that were created, formed, challenged to be part of what this God was doing to get his creation project back on track. There are obstacles to his plan, to his dream. Human beings created to be partners in what he is doing, to look after each other, to look after creation, to be part of what he is doing in the world, are also free to make choices, and the choices have consequences. And so a family are challenged, called to be part of bringing things back on track. Joseph is now carrying that dream. Joseph was introduced as a spoiled teenager. He was sold into slavery. He ended up in the household of a man called Potiphar, where, due to Mrs. Potiphar, Joseph ended up in prison. But as we heard before, there's a harmony, a melody, a refrain, a theme that comes back, a thread time and time again, that says, despite the fact Joseph had an obstacle, despite the fact Joseph was in prison, God was with him. God was with him. And so in prison with actually members of the royal household, the household of the Pharaoh, the ruler of the Egyptian empire, God is with Joseph. And the warden in prison sees that and sees that blessing comes around Joseph, that if Joseph is allowed to take care of things, to take charge, then good things happen. And very quickly he's put in charge of everything, takes care of everything in the prison, and things go well. Joseph, it seems, is made for looking after things, for taking responsibility for making things better, for bringing a blessing. He's not alone in the prison. In the prison also is a cupbearer to the Pharaoh and a baker in the royal court. Cupbearer is an incredibly loyal and trustworthy position in the Pharaoh's household, second only to the Pharaoh himself, giving advice, tasting food before the Pharaoh, an incredibly prestigious and a wealthy position. The baker, a trusted part of the royal household. Both these men have problems in the prison. They're troubled by dreams. Now, there's a industry, there's a wealth of theories and writings and courses and ideas around about dreams, from the idea that dreams are just our brain sorting out our subconscious, the kind of experiences that have happened to us, and putting them in some sort of semblance of order, to the other end of the theories that say that dreams are trying to tell us something, and we can learn things about our destiny by interpreting them properly. I'm not going to talk about that today, because this story isn't about those kinds of dreams. This is not a story about nightmares caused by too many things going on, or about the kind of things that go on in your mind because you had a really big meal before you went to sleep. When the word dream is used in these stories, and it's used a lot, the idea is about what we might call a vision, an insight, a message, a revelation, truth that is being communicated. And these men, the cupbearer and the baker, are having visions that they can't understand. Why? Well, the cupbearer and the baker represent the system, the empire. And the empire doesn't understand this truth, this dream, this vision. The empire is not about anyone else telling you what truth is, or how things are, or who you are. The empire is about getting and grabbing and controlling, and about working things out for yourself. So the empire doesn't understand these messages, but someone does. Joseph says, but surely interpretation of these dreams comes from God. And Joseph himself says, tell me your dreams. And he's able to interpret the dreams, the visions for these men. Why? Because Joseph knows who he is and what he is made for and where truth comes from. Truth is not always good news. And these messages, these insights for these two men are good on the one hand and bad on the other. One, the cupbearer is going to be restored to the royal household. His head is going to be lifted up. The other, the baker, is going to die. His head is going to be lifted off. Imagine that. Lovely. Joseph knows that, as painful as it is, he is able and he is made to pass on these kinds of understandings, messages, visions, and what they mean. It's part of who he is made to be, to bring truth, to bring understanding, to bring insight, to bring blessing. And as he passes on this dream, he asks very politely, he says, when you are restored, the cupbearer, please remember me and show kindness. Remember me and show kindness. Everything works out as the messages, as the visions said they would. But the cupbearer doesn't remember. The cupbearer forgets once everything goes well with him. The empire doesn't remember Joseph. But someone does. The word remember is used time and time again in this story and in these stories. The God who holds this dream, this plan, this project, is a God who remembers. And the command, time and time again, for his partners is to remember. Not remember how to behave, but remember who they are, who God is, what God has done, and what they were made for. And to know that God remembers. Not that God sometimes isn't thinking about it and then suddenly remembers them, but that God holds them. That's what the word means, in his mind. That their God knows who they are. That their God knows who they are made for. That their God brings truth, both painful and comforting. That their God is a God who brings blessing and who holds on to them and hope, and who in the midst of chaos and crisis holds them in his hands. Imagine that.